Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary. At Bet365, Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. InsideTheBirds.com is here. The Eagles beat the Giants yesterday. Insignificant to this conversation, the Eagles will face the Green Bay Packers, just like they opened the season. This time, if someone loses, they are going home. We'll bring in Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast right now for another edition of Football at 4 on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. There he is, Geoff Mosher, one of the creators of InsideTheBirds.com, and he joins us now as the Eagles win yesterday. Initial takeaway, obviously, from a lot of people is Tanner McKee, and he played well yesterday. You know Eagles fans, man, they're already saying, you got to stick with Tanner McKee. Nick was asked about him today. What did you think about Tanner McKee that stood out in the game? Because I think the bigger question is if JalenHurts could not play or got hurt, is that where the Eagles have a decision to make?
No, Mike. They don't have a decision to make. Their backup is Kenny Pickett, and Tanner McKee did look nice. I think you're right that sometimes, because it's the backup or the third stringer and you see something different or good, you get very excited about it. I mean, he did throw. He did not put the ball in harm's way. That was good. He completed 66% of his passes. That's great. I mean, he put 20 points on the board. So let's not go and, go crazy over it. He had 2 nice touchdown passes. I thought the usage is what stood out, Mike. My takeaway is that they got him going early on and got him to be able to get the ball quickly to wide receivers who are open by putting him under center. And working a lot of play action and boots, right? And that's a lot of what the Kellen Moore offense has looked like in the past. So that it was an interesting development. I felt like when the Eagles passed the ball early in the downs on 1st and 10, on 2nd and short, they were successful. But when the Eagles were behind the sticks at times, or when it was 3rd and long, when the Giants could get a pass rush, you did see Tanner McKee throw the ball a little low or a little high or a little off target. So his mobility is better than as advertised out of Stanford, where he's kind of considered a statue. He obviously can move in and out of the pocket well enough to do some of those rollouts. But he also, like most quarterbacks who have only started a little bit, on 3rd down or 2nd and long, when they're in passing situations, he looks a little bit different in that regard. So obviously it's a very, very small sample size, but this is a kid that the Eagles clearly like. He's played well when given the opportunity, and I'm sure next year he'll be given a shot to win that backup job. But for right now, for this year, the reality is if you don't have JalenHurts, you're probably not going to go very far in the playoffs anyway, but Kenny Pickett will be the backup.
Yeah, I actually saw what you saw. I was at the game yesterday and tweeted out at one point, I like to see this type of play call for JalenHurts. There was a lot of little bootleg, bringing the tight end across the back. They ran that play 15 times yesterday, and there's Dallas Goedert wide open. Now, I get it. You don't have A.J. Brown and you don't have Devontae Smith as options, so you're trying to manufacture ways to get guys the ball. And, hey, Goddard's my best weapon on this day while he was in the game. They found ways to get him the ball. But I love that little play they ran with him a bunch. They got Dotson involved in the game. I guess the big question will be, we've seen Howie Roseman end this playbook a lot. Are teams going to call the Eagles and overpay for Tanner McKee? I don't think Kenny Pickett has any value. So people will keep saying, trade Pickett, keep McKee. I'm wondering if they threw the ball 41 times with him yesterday to see if anybody would overpay like they did for A.J. Feely, like they did for Kevin Cobb in the past.
Yeah, I doubt it, honestly. Feely had 4 games under his belt when and success there. Tanner McKee has basically started 1 game in the NFL. So I don't see that being the case. I know that it's a weaker quarterback class, and would maybe a team try to call Tanner McKee to bring him in to compete, but mostly be a backup.
Yep.
But the Eagles don't want to get rid of him because they see him as a cost-efficient backup. And if they're able to, say, trade Kenny Pickett next year coming out of camp or maybe this offseason, whatever, then maybe then the opportunity is for them to get what they want, which is to have McKee be their very low-cost backup.
Geoff Mosher's here. Yeah, I agree. Listen, I mean, low cost for McKee. And I'm just saying, if somebody called and knocked your socks off, there's too much of a luxury to say, no, we want him to be our guy. If someone said, I'll give you a 3rd-round pick for that kid, They'd be packing his bags, don't you think?
Of course, but I'd be stunned off my rocking chair.
Well, that's where I think we differ a little bit. I think teams are so desperate. They see a kid who just was efficient, like, hey, for a third-round pick, we'll take our shot with somebody. But we'll see. That's neither here nor there. JalenHurts, non-committal. No new info today. But, Geoff Mosher, he will play on Sunday, correct?
Well, I can't definitively say he'll play Sunday because I don't know, and I don't think anybody ever does with concussion protocol. Your response to activity is important. So we know that he took part in the walkthrough on Saturday. So that's part of advancing from stage 3 to stage 4. But so then he'll need more activity, team stuff that he'll be able to do now. And then they'll practice tomorrow. They'll practice on Wednesday. Yeah. But I'm with you in that I think he's on track to be able to practice and play, but without knowing how his response is from that walkthrough or a day or two later. So to your point, barring any unforeseen symptoms that pop up between whenever he was, that Saturday and they practice Wednesday, then you would assume he'll be on track.
Yeah, obviously, because you do have the people out there that are like, he hasn't played in a couple of weeks, you see McKee play one game. People want to stick with that. That's what got you there. But look, to win the Super Bowl, you need JalenHurts, and you need him playing at his highest level. Give me something you remember from week 1 in this matchup that would excite you in this matchup if you're an Eagles fan. Hey, you're playing Green Bay. You got some Eagles fans saying, man, this Green Bay team's pretty good. You got to play them in the wild card game. If you go back to week 1, what's something that the Eagles were able to do that you should say, they were able to do this, and that's why they should win this game?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, if I recall, they came out of half and sprung a big play to A.J. Brown. And I know that the Packers, if Jair Alexander, his health is always an issue. And if he doesn't play, the Packers aren't nearly the same. They're still good, but they're not the same. And obviously they just lost Christian Watson, so they're already reeling a little bit. But they got a big play in that game, if I recall, to A.J. Brown. Look, the Barkley wheel route was a great play and a great design and everything, but I can't sit there and say that's going to be open all the time. And when we broke down that play with Greg Cosell on Inside the Tape, the linebacker, I think it was McDuffie is his name, was so close to getting inches. It's a game of inches, and that ball was an inch of being complete. So that you don't know if you can spring on the Packers again. But A.J. Brown was 5 of 119 for a touchdown. Devontae Smith had 84 yards. I remember they went for it late on a 3rd and 8 to ice the game and got it. So I do think they can throw the ball on Green Bay, assuming but I think they can throw the ball. That's why, as long as everything's good. And then the other takeaway, Mike, I just remember from that game, while the Eagles were not very good at that time in pass defense and defensively, they had a couple of turnovers, and their response to turnover in that game was really good. If I recall, they had a bunch of low red zone or mid red zone stops and made the Packers had to settle early for a couple of field goals. The Packers were up 6-0 in that game on 2 Narvison field goals because they couldn't get touchdowns. They were chip shot field goals, but the red zone defense was good.
One guy who did not play in that game was Cooper DeJean. How has his return changed their defense from the opener to what the defense that we've now seen?
Oh, in so many ways. It's hard to say that one person can change an entire defense, and I won't go that far, but he's changed a lot of what they can do defensively for Vic Fangio. We saw Avonte Maddox trouble covering, trouble tackling, right? So right away, Cooper DeJean, and we've seen it all throughout the year, good tackler, good coverage guy, plays up on guys in the slot, blitzes from the slot. So he gives you added developments in your zone pressures that Vic Fangio likes to do, where he brings 4, but he drops, an outside linebacker and he rushes either a nickel or a linebacker. Cooper DeJean has been a part of that. So he just can give you so many different levels of productivity that you weren't getting from Avonte Maddox, beyond the obvious of just being better at tackler, better at covering, and just more speed and dynamic athletic ability.
He's different. It was also the first game we ever saw Zach Bond, and boy, has he changed the dynamics of this team, man. That night, I think he had 15 tackles, 2 sacks, a tackle for loss, and you think back to that first game, we were laughing. We're like, Do the Eagles have like an all-pro player? Or are we missing something here? What has he meant to this defense, and how important he is in a game like this with Josh Jacobs?
Very important. He's meant everything to the defense. He's probably, outside of Jalen Carter, the most important player on the defense. He's earned it. He has done far better than anybody, including Vic Fangio, who has admitted this, could have expected. And, you're going to play he's as important in this game against the Packers because the Packers, sort of like the Eagles, are foundationally built to be balanced and to run the ball a lot. And they run the ball well with Josh Jacobs. And if you're going to need your best run stoppers, so Nakobe Dean and Zach Bowen, of course, have been very good against the run all year long. They've been pretty good against the pass, too. I would say better against the run, and that's what they're going to have to do to attack this Packers offense is stop Josh Jacobs.
I was at the game yesterday. One guy who stood out to me was number 90, and I'm thinking, 90? Why is 90 playing? Nick Sirianni said today, Jordan Davis, one of the best games he's ever seen him play. I agree. He was all over the place yesterday. If they could get that version of Jordan Davis, man, I'd be pretty darn pumped up about what he brings to the table there. But Green Bay, they can run, they can throw. But Jordan Davis, I thought, was a big part of the game yesterday as well. I wasn't as thrilled with Bryce Huff. He seemed insignificant, had a rough day. They were just blasting him. I kept routinely seeing that poor guy 5 to 7 yards blown off the ball there. So those were two kind of takeaways from guys that I kept my eye on because they're going to be factors in the game. I would imagine Huff is not a factor. Davis likely is.
Yeah, Davis will be a factor because he's going to have to play. I mean, he is a starter in their 5-man fronts. Now, I'm not falling for the banana in the tailpipe. If the Eagles could play against the Giants' offensive line every week, of course, Jordan Davis would probably have dominant games the way he did, but they're not. They're playing the Packers offensive line. And for the most part this year, Jordan Davis has been somewhat of a flash player who has also shown you not great snaps. And listen, that's why in a game where reserves are mostly playing, Jordan Davis played 40% of the snaps. I mean, Vic Fangio is telling you that he thinks Jordan Davis needs more work, needs more snaps. Also, that he's, if Jordan Davis had played in the game, plays in the game against the Giants and unfortunately suffers an injury, Vic Fangio doesn't think that the Eagles defense suddenly, goes out the window, or else he wouldn't have played that much. So he'll have to play well against the Packers because the Packers run the ball, but the Packers have a really good offensive line. So you hope that he gives you one of those flash games.
One thing about Tanner McKee's game that was so efficient was he found Dallas Goedert. Give me your thoughts on Goedert, his role yesterday, and then what he means coming back. I mean, I feel like Calcaterra, was efficient, was fine, but how much different is the Eagles' offense with, if at all, in your mind with Goedert? He'll be back for the game, and, they got him involved a lot early.
Yeah, first of all, let me just say how surprised I was. Well, not that he played, because it was really the day before when they activated him to the 53-man roster. I figured they would save that spot to sign like another defensive tackle or a running back, Ty Davis Price. But they clearly did it because they wanted Goedert to knock the rust off, which I think was a risk. And listen, it worked out for them, so they got him the work. But did Dallas Goedert really need that? I mean, he's a veteran player in this league. You lost C.J. Uzomah earlier last week to injured reserve. So your only backups right now are Grant Calcaterra and E.J. Jenkins. E.J. Jenkins is not going to play in a playoff game intentionally. Okay? I mean, he may not have to now if they're in 13 personnel or jumbo or something, but that's not a guy that they want on the field. So to risk getting Dallas Goedert re-injured in that game just to knock some cobwebs off, to me, I'm not sure the reward was worth the risk. However, he went out there, made some plays, looked like Dallas Goedert. And to answer your question, Mike, there are times this year, it's not been a great year for Dallas, but you go back to the Saints game, he's still a weapon. And there are times this year where he can hurt you in the pass game, and we know he's a good blocker in the run game. And they've struggled a little bit at times with Grant Calcaterra on the edges having a block. So getting him back is key for their offense, not just from the passing game, but for the completeness of the offense.
Yep. I was a little surprised that he played and then that they got him. I was like, man, they really are trying to just, they were feeding him the ball early in that game. And him and McKee, there was that one drive, 15 yards, 17 yards. It resulted in a touchdown to Anais Smith there. The other factor in this game, Let me get your take on the kicking situation. Not only the kicker, the kickoffs. I mean, that's something there. I saw that Penn State twist and turn there. I think that's something that definitely Sirianni's going to be thinking about come playoff time for any kick in like the 48 to 52-yard range where that was second nature for them.
Well, Mike, the one thing that I think would really drive fans crazy, I mean, you never like to lose in the playoffs to the Super Bowl, but you go back to 2 years ago, and, I mean, the Eagles had to carry two different punters on their 53-man into the Super Bowl, and neither of them were very good. And obviously the game turned on the Kadarius Toney punt return that set up the touchdown that I think was the go-ahead touchdown, or either the game-tying or go-ahead touchdown. I forget at this point what it was, but it was a significant point. And you just never want to end your season end, especially in the Super Bowl, because of special teams. But if you're looking at one area right now where you're really concerned, it's the kicking game with Jake Elliott, which no one's ever had that concern in a long time, right? And then also, Braden Mann's punting is fine. He's a good punter. He's doing a good job. But he's doing kickoffs, and 2 times now he's done a kickoff, and that has not, that's gone out of bounds and given the offense good field position. I think I would go back to Jake Elliott on the kickoffs if I was a little concerned there. But special teams has to be a concern at this point.
Yeah, I agree with you there. The kickoffs, kicking out of bounds, and they flip kickers. They switched kickers last week. They went back to the kicker this week. They flipped them again. And I definitely think that changes the way you coach the game if you're not confident in your kicker. And he missed another one yesterday that was pretty makeable for Jake Elliott there. I want to get your take on, in your mind, is there any scenario that Nick Sirianni loses this game that he's in trouble?
No.
Nothing.
I mean, I suppose if they lose. So I've been trying to think about this. If they lose something like, 38-10, right? What's that going to look like? It's probably going to look like the Eagles turn the ball over a lot. Not that I can't imagine the defense is just going to give up 38 points to this Packers team, and they're going to get killed because they're so ineffective defensively and so ineffective offensively. Usually when you get blown out or it's lopsided, it's because you turn the ball over, and that stuff just happens sometimes. I hate to say it, but it's true. So that's the only way I could see even Nick's job being in jeopardy is if they lose by like 21 or more points to the Packers at home. It's going to be very disappointing. But again, I think for that to happen, there would probably be some flukish element to it of turnover that you can't just sit there and say, well, the head coach made a bad call there. The head coach made a bad call there.
What does losing Watson mean to them?
I don't want to say not as much as we would think, but they've got really good receivers who can run, but none like Watson. He can really stretch a defense vertically like few in the league can. He's that good. But what the Packers are this year and what they've been, is more of a, I don't want to call them dink and dunk. They're just more of a balanced team. They run the ball a whole lot with Josh Jacobs. They're kind of like the Eagles in that regard. Run the ball a whole lot. They work the middle of the field with Dobbs, with Wicks, with their tight end who's fantastic, Tucker Kraft, right? And they throw the ball to Josh Jacobs. They don't throw the ball very deep often, and not because Watson has been hurt a lot. Yes, that's true, but because it just doesn't seem to be a staple of what Matt LaFleur is doing with this offense, right? So while it is a loss because a guy like that can give you that 1 or 2 catches that changes a game, to me, it's not the worst loss in the world. Like there are other if they lost Josh Jacobs, I tell you they were done. And even some other receivers like Kraft or Dobbs who are a little bit more impactful on a snap-to-snap basis, I'd say, man, that's really rough to overcome.
Yeah, I'm just
going to overcome the loss of him.
The one thing I will say is he caught the touchdown in the first game, and I agree with you on his ability to stretch the field like other guys can. But with him not there, it allows the Eagles to put more attention on Reed, and he was the guy that got them in the first game. He had the big game against them. But if you're not worried about where Watson is, I can put more attention to Reed and have a little bit better understanding of where he is. And look, the Eagles' defense is way different from the first night to this night. Mitchell, much more savvy. DeJean, not there the first night. Communication probably much better than it was in week 1 against the Packers in Brazil.
Yeah, well, let me tell you something about Jaden Reed. He's his role in the offense has been sort of enigmatic because since November 17th, he's had one game over 48 yards. Right, he was 3 for 76 against New Orleans, a couple days before Christmas. But here's his stats from November 17th: 2 for 23, then 3 for 26, then 3 for 24, then 0 for 0, then 5 for 34, 376, 248. So he still gives you some big play ability. You see that when you're 2 of 48, like he was against the Bears here. But he's taken a backseat to Kraft. Kraft and Dobbs have become far more impactful and consistent. Kraft has been really, really good for them. And they drafted the other tight end in the second round thinking Musgrave was going to be the guy. But Kraft has been good. So I don't know what that means for this game as far as – you're right, Jaden Reed tore him up in the first half like he was tearing up a lot of teams. He had 139 against Minnesota earlier this year, 113 against Detroit. So he can always pop up. But the way the Packers play, that's not the number one guy right now to me that I think you're concerned about. I think the running back, Kraft, and Dobbs are the three guys. And then there's this wild card with Dontavian Wicks. And I guess you could throw Reed and Wicks in this boat where if it's a close game, one of those two guys can make a play to beat you. They are deep. I would give the Packers this. I don't think they're as talented as the Eagles. Clearly not. They don't have an A.J. Brown. They don't have a Devontae Smith. But they are 1 through 5 deeper in pass catchers than the Philadelphia Eagles are.
Real quick, some news in the NFC East. Mike McCarthy. He's going to interview with the Chicago Bears. He is not fired. His contract has expired next week. So he will interview with the Chicago Bears. Joe Shane and Brian Daboll with the Giants, they both will be back. So the NFC East, at least two, are going through some transition right now. The Giants will bring back their coach and GM. The Dallas Cowboys, we do not know yet, but Mike McCarthy will interview with the Bears. How about that, Geoff Mosher?
How about that? Also, Mike, have you guys talked about yet the Eagles' schedule for next year?
Brought this up last week. Brutal.
Oh, my. This is even worse than last year. The whole gauntlet that they had from Buffalo to San Fran and Kansas City.
Well,
oh, man.
They play Kansas City, they play Buffalo, they play Detroit, they play Minnesota, they got the two.
Rams, the Bucks, the Chargers. Geez. And the Commanders are probably going to be pretty good again next year. Wow.
Yes, and they got Buffalo. They got Tampa Bay, who they seemingly always play now. So Tampa Bay, Buffalo is the cross game. So they got kind of the worst situation there. Kansas City, and the road games too. They've got 6 road games that are just brutal next year.
Yeah, man. So better. You know what they say? Even Dan Campbell said this last year about the Lions. Now he proved to be, I don't want to say wrong, but he said, you just never know if you're going to get back. The Lions are great. We'll see if they get back to the conference championship, but you got to take care of your opportunities when you get them.
Yeah, and by the way, if the Eagles are to win this game, Tampa Bay is the most likely opponent in the divisional round. So you could go from Green Bay to Tampa Bay. You could play the Rams, and you could play Minnesota. You cannot play Washington.
So you think Tampa Bay is likely to beat Minnesota? I know they're favored. I just think that Minnesota is more likely to win that game.
I kind of like Tampa, man. At home, I kind of like them at home.
You're right. It's a good game. It's
It's a 4-5.
There's something weird about Tampa. They were struggling the last 2 weeks to win the game. Well, no, 2 weeks ago they blew them out. But you thought that they were going to handle the Saints.
I think that game last night took Minnesota's soul.
They did look frustrated, didn't they?
They got embarrassed. They got that was one of those things we're going to show you that you can't win with your quarterback, and we're going to do it on national TV. And Darnold at the end of that game looked like, man, this is why nobody believes in me. And now I get it. Now I get it.
Well, I just know one thing. When Tampa and Minnesota played, that means Todd Bowles versus Brian Flores. You're going to see a lot of blitzing. You're going to see a whole lot of blitzing.
The old Tampa Bay Bucks, Minnesota Vikings. That's the 4-5 game Monday night. You can hear that game on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher, the Inside the Birds podcast, InsideTheBirds.com. Football at 4 all week long, getting you ready for Eagles and Packers here on 97.3 ESPN. All right, Moshe, thanks, buddy.
See you, Mike.